Hello, you little mappy muffins, and have I got a new series for you. Don't worry, it is not just the big, huge white piece of canvas that we've got going on here. I am going to explain. So we've actually got a new project going on. Why am I wiggling my mouth so much? I don't know. Who knows? Who cares to ponder why? But we got a new project. The project is actually for Chaosium. I had 2 projects with them this year, one of which I can't talk about. This one I can. Yay! And it is going to be a map of London. And so we're actually going to record, I think, all of this. We're going to do this together. We're going to start with a blank slate, and I thought this episode could be a good one to break ground and show you what I am thinking about right from the get-go, okay? You know, client approaches me, they explain what they want map-wise, I kind of start to gather some thoughts on it. Where do we then go from here? What is the beginning of the project? Well, this is the beginning of the project, and I will explain by bringing up this. Hopefully you can read that. It's just a little bit of a text document in the middle of the screen. I don't even know why I've got that. Let's give it that. So they want a map, and by the way, you should always ask your clients this: what is the size of this map going to be? So Chaosium wants this map 17 inches, 17.3 inches by 11.5. That's their print area, okay? But they also want an option to be able to blow this thing up to a poster. And maybe it's going to be, I don't think they're going to do a fold out, but they always like to have a poster as an option, right? So I then typically double it, okay? So if I double their map dimensions, I'm going to end up with 34 inches, 0.6 by 22 and a half. This gives us our baseline, right? But I'll tell you what, most clients, even if they don't realize it, and the more indie the company, the less they may think about this, but there's always going to be a potential consideration for bleed. That is the bit outside of the print area, as they're laying it out in the book, where they want a little bit of forgiveness. So you kind of have to draw into this dead zone just in case they need it, and their map ends up being, 34.7 wide. That way you've accommodated for it. So we're going to add a 0.2 inch bleed. That then nicely gives us 35 inches by 22.9. And they ask for 400 DPI. The minimum I would do is 300. Often I'll do 450, 600 occasionally. 400 is a nice little sort of middle ground right there. So what that means is, if I bring up our image size, I've already kind of got all of this in. We got our 35, we got our 22.9, and 400 DPI. So there's our basics, right? That gives us this canvas here. Now I've gone one stage further, and I've given myself an actual border here. This border is actually right now, if I just zoom in, is basically the 0.2 inches plus a little bit. Like if I actually, we'll add some rules I think on this. Let's do view, new guide, and we'll do the new guide sort of 0.2 inches in. That right there is the bleed. All of this black is bleed. Okay, and we'll do the same on the other side. View, new guide, and we'll do it on the horizontal this time, 0.2. You'll get the idea, okay? So this black border is my bleed. Now, I haven't drawn the border yet. This is just a kind of a placeholder, but at the very least, they would have this black rule, and if they need to edge into the bleed a little bit, then they'll have a little bit more black. Now, we are going to potentially revise this completely, but this gives me a baseline. I need to draw into this space, or at least have some kind of map border design that comes into this space here. Right, so you get the idea. Everything on the interior here, this is our draw zone. This is where we're going to be drawing, and we are drawing London Gaslight. Now that's fun. That's like the second half of the 19th century. So we're talking 1850s, 1860s, 1880s. 1880s? Yeah. That's what we're going to be drawing. Now, there are some quirks to now drawing now. Because if I just bring up a modern map of London as my basis, it's going to have A roads in there. It's going to have neighborhoods that have been leveled and roads put through them, new buildings that didn't exist back then. So we're going to have to reference some old maps. We're going to have to reference some maps from the period to be able to get this right. And there are two sources for that. And two sources I think I want to recommend to you. One is actually, of course, the British Library, explore.bl.uk. I can put a link down in the description below. But the British Library actually has an online map resource. It actually has a whole bunch of other stuff too. And like if you could do a search, I searched for London. I added some sort of filters to get the right sort of time period. It's a bit of a kludgy site. It's kind of like the map range or the date range was 1800 to 2005, which is really weird, but I narrowed it down until I kind of got a range I was pretty comfortable with. And you get results a little bit like this. And if, by the way, you're looking at this on the screen thinking, well, that's pretty small. Yeah, you're right. This is not particularly brilliant. If I hit back, you can go, full size principal image, please. And you get this. It's not huge. It's really not. If I do the metadata on it, it's like when they say it's 43 centimeters by 73 centimeters. But that might be the original. But when you do this, it's not. That's not the version you're getting online. So I'm a little bit disappointed by that. But I have grabbed these. We're going to go through them together in a moment. And so I grabbed a whole bunch of period London maps. And I'm going to tell you how and why I'm using those in a moment. Also, the Library of Congress is actually an awesome resource. loc.gov. It's a brilliant resource. They have maps of Egypt, Cairo, London, of course a whole bunch of American maps, all over the world. And what I love about the Library of Congress is you can pick the size you want and you can download these massive TIFF files. They're hugely detailed. Wonderful maps. I mean, I'll zoom in like this right now. Let's just maximize this real quick. Look at the clarity of these maps. The Library of Congress honestly has it going on, and they're better than the British Library, unfortunately. The interface is better, the filters are better, and their clarity of scan. This is just pure sex right here. I love this. By the way, I love this style as well. I think I might actually pick up a lot of this particular map. I've already downloaded it, I'll show you. I adore this style. This is probably how we're going to draw ours. I think this is how we're going to do this. I love the subtle use of color. I love the simplistic border that got going on. The grid, the hashed fill on these sort of city blocks. Really digging this quite a bit. I love the subtle, almost pastel yellow that's going on for the main roads. This style here is really calling out to me. I think this is kind of what we're going to do. But anyway, I downloaded this massive 120 megabyte map. We're going to take a look at these now. But Library of Congress and the British Library, I'll put links to both of those down in the actual description below, if I remember. So we've got our canvas size, and then what I did is I've dropped in all of those examples. Now, why do I have these examples right here? Well, there's a couple of reasons. There's a couple of uses that I actually now have for these. One is, at a high level, what were the general colors, design approaches that they had for the period? Because I want this to feel like a period map, right? I want you to open up this book and it to have that right, I want to say the word ambience, but that right branding. It's got to evoke within you a sense of the late 1800s. It can't look like a modern map. So things like border designs, even the way that they're handling the title at the top, these are not this is not calling out to me. There's some elements of the interior which are actually similar to the one I just showed you on the Library of Congress, particularly how they're handling the major roads. But also, I can use this as a template for drawing over these roads. And that's exactly how I'm basically going to use these. So I'm going to come back to that in a moment, okay? So that one I kind of like. This one's pretty good too. This is curious because it's kind of curious how they've handled these labels on the outside. Isn't that fun? Isn't that a fun way of doing it? So that's interesting. Also, notice they're doing this main roads in the same way. Right, and this, by the way, might have been the one I was just looking at in the Library of Congress. Love the way they do the main roads. Love the way they're handling the water of the Thames. I love this insert too for the title at the top. We might do something like this on our title right here. This had, and I think I might even draw some little ships and stuff along the dockyards and stuff. And this will have a nice sort of gaslight feel. So that's a good one. That's one of my favourites. This one's okay. This one's okay. Obviously, it's got all the fold lines on it. It's a little bit too black and white. They've got a similar sort of treatment for the Thames. I do like these lines, by the way, on the Thames. I'm probably going to pick this up right here. This will be kind of my approach for handling the Thames itself. But I'm going to handle the roads with that subtle yellow. We do have a nice simplistic border. This is the second time we've seen this border style. They do have a grid on this, so we're going to be adding a grid to ours too. So grid, border, we're getting an idea for the maybe the handling of the title, or an insert like this in the top right corner. I think something like that is kind of where we're going to be going at. Here we have a similar sort of style again. That might have been very similar to it. Look, two different maps. Very, very, very similar styles. So you get the idea. I think we're going to be shooting for something like this. Now, I did pick up a few others too. These are the ones off the British Library, and they're so small. So they're super blurry. I'm really not happy with these. I could probably use them as a way of ensuring my roads are in the right position, but ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, maybe adding border details like this, but I don't want to lose border space in order just to add decoration on the outside. That's unless we need to, and I'm going to talk about what we're drawing right now. So I do love this attention to detail, but look how much space we're losing, you know. They say that they want something 17 inches across, and we end up basically giving them a map that's going to be 10 inches across and a whole bunch of decoration. So I like this idea. If we need to do inserts and stuff, we might play around with something like that. Otherwise, I'm going to use these just to... Look, there's another one. Just as a general idea of how to maybe handle certain things. What was period appropriate, you know, at the time. Otherwise just a reference, I think, for streets and styles. Okay, so where do I now go from here? Well, this particular client has a list of things that they really want to have on the map. And so they gave me this list right here. And so basically they're saying these are my points of interest that we need to accommodate for. This list here is going to determine our scale of this map. And by what I mean by that is, let's say for the sake of argument, and let's bring up a map so we can reference it. Let's just say for the sake of argument that they say that they must have the St. Paul's and the Tower of London on here, and maybe the Tower, Big Ben, which Big Ben's over here. We've got the Tower of London over here, and we've got St. Paul's here. Well, that would mean that basically we could zoom in like all this way and be able to fit everything on the map. This would be our scale then, right? We've got our main points of interest that they want to ensure that are on here. Well, we have them on here comfortably. Nothing falls outside of that range. But conversely, if they had something in Brixton that needed to be on here, well, we'd be looking at a zoom more like, well, actually, this. In fact, I think Brixton is even sort of down in this area. If they had something that's way out here in North London, outside, this is almost like the inner London right here. If they had something towards further to the north that had to be on this map, then very possibly you know, we might end up drawing something like this and obviously filling in this area here. So what I need to now do is get all of our points of interest on this canvas and then rescale to ensure that everything fits optimally. Okay, and there will be a couple of fine points to that too. So I'm just gonna I've got a funny feeling that I should really just get a Google map on this for now and get our main points of interest on. Let's do that first. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna literally go over to Google Maps London, and we'll click on this, and I'm going to zoom out. Oops, let's just zoom in a little bit. I think what I might do is take a screen capture of like this. This is going to be our base template here of scale. Okay, and then I'm going to place our points of interest on top of this where they actually fall. Then we're going to rescale this. And so let me give you an example. In fact, let me just keep this on here. Let's do this. Use a program called Snagit. And this will become our canvas. This is obviously way more than just inner London now, and hopefully way more than we need to draw. Let's just minimize that. We're going to need that in a moment. Let's paste that in there. And now this is going to have nothing to do with our final map, okay? This is so we now are going to put our points of interest on here. Let's just make this a little bit larger, I think. I'm hoping that our scale is even more zoomed in this. Now I'm going to do a fast forward, but to give you an idea, they want to ensure that on their map there is the Bank of England, Threadneedle Street. Okay, well, I'm going to take that. I'm now going to do a search for that. And it looks like it might even, maybe it's, I'm not even sure if it's still on Threadneedle Street, but let's find out. Our Bank of England is right here. It is still on Threadneedle Street, look at that. So much of an institution in England, you know what I mean? So much of an institution, that's just wonderful. Okay, so the Bank of England is right there, okay? The way that translates to our map here, if I zoom in, is right about between these two, kind of an intersection right about here. Bank of England is right here. So what I'm going to do is I am going to quite literally just take a dot. Let's make this a little bit smaller. And I'm going to draw right on top of this layer here, because this, oops, let's do it in black. Or red. Let's do it actually in red. This is the Bank of England, right? That's approximately there, right? That's a teeny tiny wiggle, fella. You know what I think I might do, just real quick? Let's just do it on a separate layer. Because then that way, on this layer, we can add, like, you know, a little bit of a stroke on there. Just to have it sort of show up. Maybe it doesn't need to be quite that big. But something like that is a little bit easier to see. Bank of England fits. I'm going to do this for all of their other POIs that they've got. We're going to put them all on there. And we're going to see... is there a cluster of dots in this sort of thing, or do we have a dot all the way over here? And that will help us decide what our zoom in is going to be for London. So I'll be right back, and we're going to fast forward me adding dots. I'll talk to you in a second. And we are back. That took over an hour to get all of those on there. Why did we go through that exercise? Well, you can see that if we were doing all of the POIs in pretty much central London, then we would get away with, you know, a scale that looks something like, let's say that, for the sake of argument. We've got all of our POIs on there, right? Everything's great. This will be then our scale of London. Get some good drawing going on in there. However, the client asked for several POIs on the outlying areas here. These cemeteries are going to throw a little bit of wrench in the works. I'm going to zoom all of the way out and kind of demonstrate why. In fact, let's move the stations, the dots on our sample London kind of out. Let's just hide our examples. We don't need them now. We're now going to make this our, let's call it drawing template, right? This is our kind of scale. So in other words, if I quickly sort of drag this into place, like our boundary of the map has to be something like, well, that actually, right? So now I'm gonna quickly take them off because we don't need them. Oops, I don't know what I just did. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of this. And lastly, I thought there was another one. Oh, it is. Okay, let's get rid of that. I am going to actually resize our template here. And I'm going to zoom out to do this. And I'm gonna get it so our dots are on the map. See, there's a dot right here. That dot has to stay on the map. So where's our northern dot? We've got a dot right there. So we can kind of drag that out to here. Got a dot here. Got a dot there. Those I think are going to be our limits, right? So we've got a dot. We've got a dot. We've got a lot of activity going on here. And we've kind of got some dots here too. So let's just, for the sake of argument, say if we are going to draw this map in such a manner where this cemetery here and this cemetery here are on it, then we have to kind of draw around that sort of scale. Now that's not the end of the world. That's not a bad scale. That's not terrible. But here's some of my considerations. We're gonna have a lot of dead space here. We're gonna have a lot of dead space here. And we are gonna have a massive concentration of labels right here. Now, it's not terrible to have some dead spaces because you can put labels and keys and things like that in these locations. Gives you a little bit of room. In fact, if anything, I would say you need a little bit of dead space. But look at this concentration of where we're going to have numbers and such. It's all dead in the center. Now, here's one other thing I want you to think about when you're drawing your maps. This is a 2-page spread. Where's the fold line? There is going to be the spine of the book on this. Well, it's in the center and it's right there, which means not only are all of our dots right in the middle, but they're falling, at least in part, on the spine. You're not even going to be able to see the dots. All of our detail, all of our point of the map is literally falling in the very worst area, the spine. I don't think this is particularly brilliant. I wouldn't want to really draw this. In fact, if anything, honestly, you can kind of almost get the entire freaking map on one page. You see that? And it would actually, if anything, have better balance to it. Like, there's nothing over here except for one dot. So really, just by the way that these dots are distributed, these points of interests are distributed, this is a vertical map, not a horizontal map. So this is not great. So what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to send this to Chaosium. And I'm going to recommend that either the most southern or northern cemetery is ignored. Maybe both, and we just add a little insert for those. Because that will enable us to zoom way in. So my next step is to now send this to them, explain my logic. I suspect they're going to agree, and we are going to zoom in. And the next iteration of this map will be closer in. Really and truly, I would love to actually focus this map on this area right here. And everything else be a zoom in. To such a point where I think I'm actually going to just add a layer right now. I want to do a map that kind of focuses on this. Like so. Let's do a quick stroke on that. Let's make it black. Okay, there we go on the outside. And can we see that? Yes. That's where I would like to focus on. And that's really good. That's kind of in London, to be honest with you, right here. And they want me to mark the, was it a square mile or something? They want me to mark the square mile, which I think would kind of fall like this, right about here. I think that this should be our 2-page spread. But this, and this, and this mean that we can't. Not unless the client agrees that these can be dropped, at least on the map. And maybe we do them as little inserts, right? Kind of on, then I'll zoom in. That's kind of what I'm going to go with. So that is chapter 1. That is the logic of how I approach this. We are going to pick this up when I get feedback from Chaosium about, let's call it, what area we're actually mapping. So until then, until I get that answer, I'm going to see you on the flip side. Everyone have a good one, you sexy human beings. And if no one says that you're sexy, you are. I believe in you. Screw everyone else. Love you, all of you. Look forward to sharing the progress of this map with you. Talk soon.